Welcome, everybody, to our Leaders in Housing Counseling call, our first call for 2021. Congratulations, we made it this far. We got through 2020, and as we all know, 2021 has already been an incredible roller coaster. But we will all continue doing the good work, and I appreciate everybody's hanging in there because it's a lot to do, a lot of challenges and opportunities, and we'll talk about them on today's call. First, heads up, so we are going to start with just some updates, and really what I'm going to talk about is some of the highest things we're thinking about in the housing counseling world. This is going to be kind of rapid fire, and we'll have chances to dive much more deeply into lots of these pieces over the course of the next few months, but wanted to just make sure these things are on your radar, and certainly if you have thoughts and information about any of them, please feel free to share with us, because this is kind of a vital conversation we're often having on policy questions. And then we're pleased to have a couple people coming in who have been before, but they're really expert voices in the field. So on what the current foreclosure and forbearance policies are and what's happening at the CFPB, we have our friend Mark McCardle, who we have a long history with and is really helpful on these questions. And then we're going to review what's in the stimulus package and the eviction moratorium in relation to how it affects our housing counseling work. We have Lisa Sitkin from the National Housing Law Project. As you know, she's a terrific presenter and thoughtful, and also very good about thinking about how this affects our work in the housing counseling field. In both those, we'll have time for Q&A, so please put in your questions. Ellie will be happy to figure out how to get them asked at the right time, and we have time for all of it. We'll make a next quick plug on our membership. So I have to say thanks, everybody. We're getting plenty of renewals already at the beginning of the year, and we really deeply appreciate this. I know it's not an easy time for many people's budgets. And then finally, David Berenbaum is now the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Housing Counseling. He's the head of the Office of Housing Counseling, so one of our own, and he's been getting out there already, so many of you may have heard him say a few words. He is planning a very ambitious agenda. He is deeply thoughtful about our work, is deeply knowledgeable. So we're going to have a candid conversation with him in 2 weeks. So please come. We're going to give him a little bit of time to present, and we're going to really try to do it as a Q&A and let people kind of go through all the issues, how to get the NOFA out early, how to, what are the issues on certification, how do we position housing counseling at HUD these days. It's really an open basket for you, and he's willing to take all and everything. So that should be very, very interesting. So let's get started. Let's start with housing counseling updates. And this is going to be kind of a quick speed dating on what the issues are that we're working on. And really to kind of give you a little bit more of a flavor of stuff, we will have time to dive in more deeply on a lot of these issues, but wanted to give you a sense that there is a lot happening and a lot that we have opportunity with. And part of it's because of the new administration. Part of it is that we are particularly well positioned from last year. Part of it is that we have a very, very more helpful House and Senate that will be able to, and a lot of what we're talking about has bipartisan support, will make it easier. The groundwork has been laid. So lots and lots of opportunity. So just to break it out in a few areas, funding we know is critical for our work. And so we're involved in the conversation on it's a fee-for-service project to better define fee-for-service and socialize it among lenders to get it to be done more routinely and maybe a little bit more effectively and priced a little more appropriately to be able to support your work. And Housing Partnership Network, HPN, has has been convening a set of conversations. It's a collective effort of a bunch of the housing counseling groups. We're deeply involved with it, and we're working with NeighborWorks America is deeply involved, Unitas US, NFCC, many other organizations, the Minnesota Home Ownership Center, Housing Action Illinois, and CRC. I mean, a lot of groups are in this conversation, and we are hoping that this will kind of change the conversation over the next few months so that it'll be more useful to you in the field and we can get more funding from lenders. We are continuing to press on getting our funding proposals into the COVID-19 stimulus package. We are hoping our friends inside the administration may have influenced what the president's proposal is. It's going to be announced, I think, today. So we made some efforts there in the past week. But I think where we have a stronger card to play is in the House and Senate, where we have very strong supporters. And I think there's a lot of interest in making sure housing counseling is a piece of the solution. So I think that's an area where we are very encouraged to see substantial investment. And we'll talk about that more in the future. We are making a push that we've already raised with the transition people on what is the number that the president proposes for HUD housing counseling assistance. And for this coming year, we're pushing that they do $100 million, which would be up from the $45 million they normally have been doing. This is a new administration. This is certainly a stretch, but it would give us a much better baseline to work with. We floated this a tiny bit with incoming Secretary at HUD, Marcia Fudge, and we've gotten it to the transition people in a bunch of different ways, and we will, as soon as she's in place, we'll try to encourage that be part of the conversation, along with a lot of other reform things, ideas on making FHA a lot more equitable and tying housing counseling much more effectively into FHA. There's a lot of conversations that we'll be able to have, and I think we have some strong supporters in the current HUD, and we're hearing about people who might be nominated who have been on our calls in the past as advocates and area experts who may be key roles at HUD coming forward. It'd be really great for us. So lots of promising things there. We're also part of the Black Homeownership Collaborative effort led by the National Housing Conference and the MBA and NAREB and a lot of other organizations. NAF is having the National Fair Housing Alliance is having a very big role in this. And we are co-chairing along with NeighborWorks America and Home for USA discussions around the housing counseling component and the down payment assistance component. And one of the places that we are really exploring and have an opportunity to develop, we hope, is that there's a 10 basis points built into the pricing with the GSE loans, with Fannie and Freddie loans. And that was part of an effort 10 years ago to get to free up some money that would actually not go for housing whatsoever, even though it's coming from Fannie and Freddie, but would go towards paying, allowing a reduction in payroll taxes for really just 2 or 3 months, way back then when there was stimulus needed. And that's coming to an end in October. And Mike Stegman, who we have worked a lot with, I don't think he's ever been on our calls, but was deeply involved in the Obama administration. I think he's at Urban Institute of Brookings right now, but he's been quite involved in a lot of public policy issues. He made a very interesting article. I'll need to circulate it. Maybe we have already circulated, but we'll make sure we did. about how that money could be used for down payment assistance to address the racial equity gaps that happen in home ownership. And we're really trying to embrace that idea and also build in a housing counseling component. That can generate several $1 billion in funding. And it's obviously there'll be competing interests for that, but I mean, we may have some momentum for building support around that. And that will come to an end in October of this year as in its current form, but trying to see if Congress would extend it. So really big opportunity there. And those are the biggest ones. There'll be others we continue to work on. On legislation, we told you this would be a speed rapid fire thing, and we've got a few more things to go here. So obviously we're going to be working on next year's appropriation, and we have been really pleased with the bipartisan support we're getting, and we will be in a much better position in the Senate this year than we were in the past. So that's very exciting. On FHA, we're trying to revive the idea of a quarter-point discount on the interest rate if you go to a housing counseling agency, and we hope that the bill did pass the House last time with bipartisan support. We're stuck in the Senate. We hope we can get the bill with the House wording, which is really, really excellent, to be reintroduced and to make it into the Senate with the House wording rather than the Senate wording. But more to come on that. On disaster recovery reform, we think this is a very good opportunity now to get this through, bring it to closure. Tremendous support, and it's and I think we are at a place where we've gotten all the major sponsors, certainly in the House we have, and hopefully in the Senate soon enough, where housing counseling will be a part of every disaster recovery plan. It deeply integrates us into the disaster recovery work. Means that whenever there's a disaster, you will have access to emergency funds and potentially longer-term funds as well, depending on the local plan. But you'll be part of it so that your groups really can be funded for the work that you probably will be doing anyway. So let's hope that works out as we expect. Housing as infrastructure, we think, is just such an important conversation and can change people's lives in America in deep ways. Very excited that the Biden administration, upcoming administration, is very interested in the concept and opportunities there. We may have other opportunities. They've talked about substantially increasing the Section 8 voucher programs for rentals, and that will make a huge difference in the quality of life and poverty opportunities in America. This is would be a game changer if it comes through, and we are trying to position that there should be a parallel expansion of the home ownership part of the Section 8 vouchers, so that we can have very low-income home ownership opportunities in around the country as well. And if you're working in that field and have some thoughts about how to make that work better and more streamlined, I know it's kind of clunky these days, we are very, very interested in those conversations. And then, and just one quick note, our friend and colleague Melody Zimmerman has actually left our staff and is now working for the realtors in the city of Philadelphia, for the Board of Realtors, lobbying for them in City Council. So we will be recruiting very soon for another person to really head up our lobbying office, and we'll start advertising for that. I'm going to really speed up so we have more time for our guests. So integration of housing counseling into the mortgage and servicing structures, the data standardization work that David Young has so ably managed is moving forward, and we will continue to work there. Please keep an eye out for occasional updates from him. Sometimes we do need information from you in the field. Very important work to really get us integrated into the standard MISMO field of communications in the mortgage field. We're going to revive the uniform residential loan application. data fields that include housing counseling and language preference data fields. That information we think is vital to the integration and into the longer term servicing of loans. We've kept this proposal alive in the Biden conversation, so we hope that can be something that happens pretty quickly with FHFA when a new director is in place. And then on supporting housing counseling work, we will work on certification and continue to support that work. We are going to do a lot of work about trying to create a clearer career path for housing counselors, so that housing counselors, we will be recruiting people for a career in housing counseling. We're working especially with Housing Action Illinois about a kind of rapid fire, quick training just to take the certification test for people new to the field, and the idea then they would be available in the job market, and groups could start hiring from that pool. We're working with Home for USA especially, and a few other groups about trying to pull together the first group of people to do a test run this spring, with the idea that we'll be full-fledged and active this summer. We'll do a lot of work on rental counseling and support the work that you all are doing. And there's a survey right now going out this morning, which went out this morning, about what eviction prevention programs there are out there currently with legal support. We need your really fast turnaround on that, because it might influence the Office of Housing Counseling conversations about how they are going to handle the extra $20 million in the budget. And finally, we'll keep the leaders calls going and keep all this good stuff going. So with that, let me turn it over to Mark McCardle, who's been on our calls before from the CFPB. And Mark, fill us in about forbearance, foreclosure, and CFPB updates.
Hi, thanks, Bruce, for having me, and good to talk to you all again. So there have been some developments at the end of last year for those following. FHA and USDA moved their forbearance application from the end of December to 2/28, the end of February. VA and the GSEs don't have, the VA has an application date right now, April 1st, and the GSEs don't have a technical application deadline yet. Also, FHA, VA, and USDA moved their foreclosure moratorium from just the end of December to February 28th as well. The GSEs through FHFA have announced that their foreclosure moratorium was moved to the end of January. It is indicated that they will be moving it again to the end of February. You probably hear about that this week, but they haven't announced it yet. FHA did announce today that they were going to extend some of their COVID-related origination flexibilities. You know, the alternative appraisals, alternative methods for documenting income, and the expanded use of power of attorney that they've been doing since the pandemic began. Here at the Bureau, we've been busily updating our website and other tools for consumers. Right now, just for sort of a general update as to where we are, there is nearly 6.5 million homeowners that entered forbearance at some point since the beginning of the pandemic, and about 43%, or 2.77 million, remain in active forbearance as of the end of November into December. The good news is that many folks who have left to date have left either through deferrals, reinstatement, modifications, good outcomes, but there is a number of folks who have left who are either in the modification process or who have just left without making contact with their servicer. So those are the ones we're most worried about. Of those who are still in forbearance, the majority are in Ginnie Mae. That means FHA or VA loans, especially FHA loans. They have the lowest percentage of folks who have left forbearance. And there is sort of an expectation that many of the people in forbearance will have, it'll be harder to get those folks into deferrals and other outcomes, and they'll probably go all the way to their full 12 months. So that's something the Bureau is tracking closely. On our website, we added a number of new tools. We've updated all of our deadlines to match the news that was just out. We also have updated our rental resources, added a number of consumer guides for you and others to use, including 7 facts about forbearance, next steps if your forbearance is ending, and how to start forbearance. We've added a number of videos and other resources, both in English and Spanish, that sort of walk folks through the process. So I encourage everybody to visit the website at www.cfpb.gov/housing or consumerfinance.gov/housing. You'll see there's a sort of easy to use guide. There's a link to find a housing counselor. It walks you through the forbearance process and what to do if you're in forbearance and if you're exiting forbearance or ready to exit forbearance. So I encourage you all to visit that. And I'll also talk a little bit in a moment about filing complaints if you see things out there. But first, I just also wanted to mention that we co-sponsored, along with a lot of housing counseling groups and other folks, the Not Okay, It's Okay campaign, which has been out there. So far about 50 servicers and 70 nonprofit groups have downloaded those resources and gotten it out there. And our director approved the use of our logo so folks can see that this is a legitimate effort, and make sure that folks who either are delinquent and have never entered forbearance, or people who are in forbearance and about to exit know that they have to reach out and talk to their servicer. So one thing that we've highlighted prominently on our website is the complaint function. So I encourage you guys who are on the front lines to if you see things that don't make sense or don't jive with what you understand the world to be. For instance, we still hear that there are some servicers who may or may not be requiring a lump sum repayment at the end of forbearance. And then especially for a CARES Act, that forbearance, that should not be an option. Also, folks who require proof of hardship when entering a CARES Act forbearance, these are the kind of things that the Bureau would love to know more about. We have on our website a helpful link that says submit a complaint. There's a form that you can fill out. It walks you through step by step. Now, I understand you guys are busy and you won't always have time to fill out that form, but it'll walk you through what kind of product it is. It'll ask you to submit documentation, and it's very helpful for us as we sort of track servicers to see which servicers are doing what and what sort of issues are emerging. That if you see things out there that doesn't look quite right, that you report that. If you don't have time to fill out the form, there's also a phone number, 855-411-2372. I'll repeat that, 855-411-2372, and we do have the ability to take complaints by phone as well. But I encourage you guys who are on the front lines to report things that you see. That'll help us. We share that information with our partners at FHA and FHFA and other federal housing agencies. We, of course, use it to feed into our own supervision process as we look at servicers and see what they're doing. So it is very helpful for us if that complaint function is used. And let's see, those are the deadlines. I gave you some data. That is a very short update, but is there any questions or anything more I can add on that?
We do have a couple of questions. So the first question is there data to support if these modifications are streamlined?
So most of the federal agencies have released options that are streamlined, or at least more so compared to the normal one. The FHA has a COVID option that requires minimal documentation, especially compared to their normal loss mitigation. The GSEs have always had a streamlined option, their flex mod. And the way it often is you'll be solicited to enter into a flex mod, and if you don't, they'll give you a blind offer. So there are definitely streamlined options out there. Others are more convoluted. For VA, your servicer may evaluate you for all their many options, which include a deferral and a modification and different variations. They have a disaster mod that can be used. So there's less of a clear waterfall for VA, but for FHA and the GSEs, they have a very clear waterfall and reduced documentation for COVID-related exits. So hopefully folks are seeing that. We'd love to hear how that's going. If you have informal feedback for us about problems, obstacles you're running into, difficulties. So, but I mean, especially FHA has a very complicated loss mitigation waterfall, and I think they did make a real effort to streamline that somewhat compared to what it was for COVID folks.
And I would just jump in if there are any problems that you're seeing in the field as a counselor about servicing issues, especially around things that are in the CARES Act, around forbearance or modification, foreclosure, refinance, please put it in the question box now, and we can pass it on to Mark.
Yeah, I mean, especially as we approach March and April, which are the biggest periods for folks, reaching 12 months, March, April, and May, we'd love to see how that exit process is going. It'd be important that we hear any feedback you guys have.
It'll be the crunch time.
It'll be the crunch time.
Okay. The questions are starting to pile in now. So Mark, did you say that the current deadline to request an initial COVID-19 forbearance for a VA loan is April 1st, 2021?
April 1st for 2021 for VA, it's 2/28 for FHA, USDA, and there is no firm deadline for the GSEs as of this moment. There's been some talk about aligning all the agencies around one date, and the end of February date has been talked about, but as of yet, that hasn't happened.
Okay. Small landlords are struggling with no rent here in Staten Island. They're retired, no mortgage, but need the rent to help them. Is there any funding for these senior citizens, small landlords? And I don't know, Mark, if this is a question you can answer, if this might be better for Lisa to answer.
Yeah, I would say that one for Lisa. I hope the stimulus funds, there's some of it could be for smaller landlords, and she might know more about that than I would.
Okay, we'll bring that back up when we have Lisa on. FlexMod has many restrictions. Are any news to possible changes to that option?
So they already rolled out their changes that they were going to make. If there's specific feedback about what's not working, we can pass that on. As you know, FHA is going to be going through a transition. So the people who worked on the last set of options will be leaving, some of them, and they'll have new leadership at least. So we'd love to hear about what's not working, and we could help partner with you guys to talk to FHA to see if there's changes that are needed.
Is the hotline a good way for folks to get that information to you? Or
yeah,
should they...
or if I'm also, my contact information is up there. I think people know that I always pick up the phone. I always answer an email. So you can also send it to me if it's like feedback on these options, because I talk to FHA all the time. So
Okay,
and
great.
just as a request, so do email so that we've got a written record, and please include Ellie and me in that email as well. We are very interested about what's working and what's not working.
absolutely.
And it helps us shape our policy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, the complaint hotline is more about when you run into a servicer who is not following procedures or is violating our servicing rules or the like, or doing something wrong. If it's more of a policy thing, then you could contact me, Bruce, and Ellie. Like this is the FlexMod, the FHA options are not just working. That would be a good thing to bring up to us.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm also suggesting people should feel free to reach out to you directly.
Yep.
And we don't need to be the go-between, but we do want to be. We do want to hear what's going on.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Okay. If complaint is filed, how can you pressure the servicer to act on the complaint? For example, failure to submit loan modification to borrower after 2 months being approved.
Yeah, so that's a clear violation. Now, the way it works is they have a certain time period to respond, and there's a response that's posted. And if you feel like this is a pattern in practice with a servicer, and that'd be another thing you could highlight for us, because we do mine the complaints all the time to find servicers that come up again and again and again. But that would be a case where we could maybe sort of use our escalation points as well to see if there's something particularly wrong with one servicer.
Okay, I think this person is asking about the complaint system. Is this only for mortgages?
The complaint system is for all the products we cover. So let me take a look at it. Like, there you'll see a list that says what product or service best matches your complaint: debt collection, credit reporting, mortgage, credit card, checking or savings account, vehicle loan or lease, student loan, payday loan, money transfer. So those are the major product categories that are in there. And so it's not just mortgage.
Okay. What will happen for homeowners who can't pay after February?
Meaning there's no option for them. Well, one thing to be clear about is forbearance is not going away. Forbearance was used before COVID-19. Forbearance will be used in the future. It's particularly used for disasters and unemployment. We expect that to continue to be the case. There may not be 12 months of forbearance, but forbearance will still be a tool that the GSEs, FHA, VA all use and will continue to use, as well as private loans. So if after February someone needs assistance, they should still reach out to their servicer. There will be forbearance and modification options generally available. even if they don't extend the deadline again.
Okay. Is there any hope that privately held loans will mimic the streamlined process that you mentioned about FHA and FHFA?
So it'll depend on the servicer and who holds the loan, the restrictions on the PLS. Generally, there are more requirements, but there are some, for instance, privately held loans that do have streamlined options. If a loan is held on portfolio, they also have, that means that the bank itself holds the loan. That also can lead to more streamlined options. But sometimes when they're servicing for an investor, there's requirements in the contract that require certain documentation, and that ties their hands. But we have seen streamlined options offered in the non-federally backed space. So there are some servicers out there doing those types of mods and options.
Okay, somebody says they've had homeowners that are still having difficulty getting in touch with their servicer. Is there any option for them?
If they can't get in touch with their servicer, yeah, that would be something you should definitely reach out to the bureau and make that complaint. And it's possible that there could be some sort of contact information problem, or the servicing transfer occurred or something where we'd love to learn more about that. So if they can't reach their servicer, who should be reaching out to them, especially if they've gone delinquent, that's something that we'd want to hear about.
And we would love to hear about it as well. And this is the kind of thing we raise with the trade groups and with regulators. Please elevate that. Just specific examples. And if you've only got one off with the services, that's still enough to get it out into the stream, because there may be others having the same experience.
That's right. Yeah, it's the canary in the coal mine.
And the only other thing I'll throw in there is that we do have the list of counselor-only contacts for escalation at a number of the servicers, certainly not at all of them. So if you are with a nonprofit HUD-approved housing counseling agency, reach out to me directly at epepper@hsgcenter.org, and I will get you the link and the password so that you can access that. Okay,
That's
can a borrower
exclusive only to housing counselors.
Can a borrower dispute a loan servicing transfer if there is an active loss mitigation review?
So they can still transfer the loan with an active loss mitigation review, but the new servicer is supposed to, by our rules, not require new documentation, not require anything to be redone. All that stuff should be transferred with the loan. So if there is a mishandoff, we'd love to hear about that. Servicing transfers has always been an area we were focused on. We get lists of large servicing transfers. If there are errors being made, if the handoff's not going well, if the documentation is not being transferred, if people are being required to start over, we would love to hear about that. But they can transfer the loan still. There's usually some servicers will voluntarily not transfer a loan in active loss mitigation, but there's no requirement. They just have to they have to make sure there's a continuity in the loss mitigation application.
Okay. Let's see. Are modifications being made based on ability to pay or a debt to income ratio?
So many of the modifications have set steps, like the flex mod just pulls certain triggers, extending the term a certain amount, lowering the interest rate to the market rate at the time of mod. Sometimes there's, they'll take the forborn amounts and put that at the end. So the old HAMP mod, where they modified to 31% of your income, is less common now. Now they pull these levers to reduce your payment. And the target should be, and was for the GSEs, 10%, to reduce your payment by at least 10%. But it would depend on where you are in your loan term and other things about how much payment relief they can get. So, I mean, that was a worry about a lot of folks leaving HAMP, is that now that, a lot of folks had very low interest rates to start off with. If they have a newer loan, so extending the term is not going to help them a lot. There's fewer tools available to lower the payment significantly. And the one thing we learned from the last crisis is that substantial payment relief is the most likely indicator of success in a modification. So if you modify somebody and you're only reducing the payment by a slight amount, that's more likely to be less successful. So this is a concern and something we have to think about, I think, as a whole, as a whole congregation of housing policy and trade groups and others about what other tools are maybe needed to get deeper payment relief for folks who need it coming out of this.
And let me just jump in on that one, because that's an area that we have raised with the transition people. So we really want to revive the conversation around principal reduction. And also, there's a second category, which is the, it's not the principal part of the mortgage, but it's the taxes and insurance, and not requiring the homeowner to pay all of them, and having the servicer / investor pick up some of that cost, so that we can reduce the monthly pay. Actually reduce the debt, but figure out how to reduce the cost of doing a modification. I mean, you know, we're going to need a lot of this, just for Mark's particular comment around the interest rates have been a lot lower for people that we're working with, but it's also, we saw that streamlined modification, it's good for some people, but it's not reaching where we need it to reach. We're especially worried about home ownership levels in communities of color and foreclosure crisis. Communities of color really paid a large price, and we do need more tools in that area. And so, any other insights about how we might be able to reduce the cost of the loan at the time of modification, we're very interested as well.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point about the taxes and insurance. Many people who are getting a deferral, you know, so that they will start resuming their old payment, but there might also be an escrow shortage because they haven't paid into escrow over the last few months when they were on forbearance. And so that's something counselors and their customers should be aware of, is that there could be an escrow shortage. They will spread that out over a period of time, sometimes as much as 5 years, but that could be another sort of affordability hit for the consumer.
Okay, before we get to the next question, I'll just say a couple of people asked for my email address again around the escalation list, and I did put it in the chat box. Okay, there is somebody who's giving information about Cenlar, saying that she's sent the third-party authorization 4 times, called 7 times. They refused to speak to her. So I'm just telling you that right now. I'll also email that information to you as well.
That'd be helpful. Thank you. I wrote it down.
Okay, another question. I have a client whose investor used to be Fannie Mae and now is a different investor. Is that possible?
That's very rare, but because once Fannie Mae guarantees the loan, they guarantee it for life. It's hard for me to think off the top of my head about, you know, for the life of that loan. It's hard for me to think off the top of my head what could possibly have happened, except if the originator violated Fannie's requirements on origination, and Fannie made the originator buy back the loan. So that's one way that it could happen, is that if they somehow didn't do things right by one of the GSEs, they have the ability to make that originator buy back the loan. So that could be one explanation for why that happened.
Well, the person who asked the question is saying that the tool was not able to locate the address.
Who wasn't?
The tool, you know, the lookup tool.
Oh, yeah. All right. That's something where we could, go ahead.
Yeah, Fannie Mae lookup tool. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have that on our website.
Great. And that was the last question.
All right.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Oh, always a
wait,
pleasure.
one quick
Feel
thing
free to reach
came-
out to me if you have other things.
Yeah, holy moly. Somebody else is saying they had a Freddie Mac that was transferred. So it sounds like this is happening. I'm wondering if they were mortgages that were ever considered distressed, and if they got sold in a pool as a distressed mortgage, possibly.
Yeah.
So
Especially if it's an older loan, that's possible.
yes. So here's a question. Are you staying at CFPB?
Yeah, for now. Unless they fire me, I'm still there.
We are very appreciative of that. We want you to be around and do the good work you're doing.
Thank you, Bruce.
All right, well, thanks, Mark. We appreciate you coming on and taking the time with us today. And I turn it back to you, Bruce.
Anytime. Bye.
Okay. And so let's move on to Lisa Sitkin from the National Housing Law Project. Lisa's a leading voice in housing law and policy, and has presented for us before, and she's going to give us an update on what was in the Stimulus Act and what about the latest on the eviction moratorium. Lisa, welcome, and take it away.
Thank you. Sorry, of course, I was muted. Hello, everybody. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy and sane in the midst of a quite crazy time. I wanted to just preface what I'm going to say with this, which is that as some of you who are on the call may know, I have been trying to make a push for kind of bridging whatever gaps exist between housing counselors and legal aid attorneys. I'm working on a sort of small project along those lines in California. And for any of you on the call who are interested in, talking about how we can foster that collaboration and clarify like when referrals are going to be useful in both directions. And this is both for homeowners and for tenants who are coming in your doors. I would, welcome that conversation. So Ellie, I don't know if you can put my email in the chat for folks, but feel free to contact me. That's something that, I thought was a real benefit for homeowners when I was working on the front lines during the foreclosure crisis, our collaborations with you guys. And I want to make sure that as we move forward into sort of treacherous times for homeowners and tenants, that we can, collaborate effectively and know what each other do and all of that. So that's my pitch for, creating those collaborative working relationships. And, you may want to think about reaching out to your local legal aids if you don't have connections with them to sort of lay that groundwork kind of before things really hit the fan. I won't say what. Okay, so that's my little soapbox. So a couple things I want to just give updates on. So one is relating to the CDC eviction moratorium, which technically speaking is now a congressional eviction moratorium, but didn't change anything. So I am happy to field questions about that, but the main thing to know is that all that happened in the relief package that came out right at the end of the year with respect to the eviction moratorium is that the existing moratorium that the CDC had issued back in September was extended through the end of this month, which is cutting it pretty close, but that means that all of the procedures that many of you may probably already be familiar with relating to the requirement that tenants fill out the CDC declaration, those remain in place. And all of the what I think most of us would consider to be unfortunate shortcomings of the CDC eviction moratorium also remain in place. None of that has changed. So while we still have what we had, we haven't gotten stronger protections for tenants at this point. I will tell you that my colleagues at NHLP and many other advocates all over the country, and probably some of you, are pressing in talks with the Biden transition team and, with congressional contacts and legislators and their staffs to put something much stronger in place. And we are cautiously hopeful that we will see something, whether it's our ideal, I can't say, before the end of the month. But as it stands now, what we've got is this CDC eviction moratorium. And the one improvement, I guess I would say, is that there were a lot of legal challenges brought to that moratorium by landlord groups over the past several months. And now that Congress has effectively ratified what the CDC did, some of that risk should have quieted. But of course, we've only got a few weeks left of it. So that may not make all that much difference. We'll see what kind of form. We don't know yet if whatever new protection or renewed protection is going to come, through this same kind of conduit of the CDC, or if it will be, some other format. So we're really kind of waiting on that and trying to give as much input as we are able to strengthen those protections. I will tell you that with respect to the declaration that tenants fill out, if they had already completed the declaration before this extension, there should be no need for them to do anything additional. But there was an update to the declaration form and to the FAQs that the CDC put out. They don't do much substantively, and it's not clear to us that it's even necessary to use the specific form or format that the CDC put out. But there are now translations of that. So you can get, I believe you can get the updated declaration in English and Spanish from the CDC's website directly. And we probably have a link to it on our COVID resources also. I have to double check that. But I will also tell you that the National Low Income Housing Coalition, which is a great resource for lots of information on all these issues I'm talking about, have prepared or found, I'm not sure what their role is, translations into many other languages. So I would recommend going to their website. I know that the Alliance for Housing Justice also does translations, and I haven't checked that they've done the updated one, but I would not be surprised. So National Low Income Housing Coalition website, and if you have any trouble finding those, please feel free to get in touch. So that's the eviction moratorium. And well, two more reminders about it. One is that, when I talk about its shortcomings, one of the biggest ones, obviously, is that people have to raise their hand. You have to fill out the declaration. It's not automatic. So that's really critical. The other is that, unfortunately, in its initial FAQs, the CDC kind of undermined some of the effectiveness by essentially saying that landlords could still kind of go ahead with the eviction process as long as people weren't weren't actually booted out of their houses. We think that's a misreading of the order, but that is out there and certainly has traction. So in counseling your tenant clients, you do need to sort of prepare them for the fact that filling out the declaration, while it should protect them against, the final step in an eviction, they may still be facing, depending on the jurisdiction and how a court system is handling things there, they may still be served with a complaint. They may still actually have to respond and even in some cases appear, which is kind of harrowing at this moment and very unfortunate. The other thing is that the CDC allowed for landlords to challenge the truthfulness of what is said in the declaration. So I just want to remind folks, as you're talking to tenants, these declarations are under penalty of perjury. We have not heard yet of anyone being prosecuted or anything, but I wouldn't put it past an ambitious prosecutor in certain jurisdictions. So tenants really do have to take care to the extent that they're looking at filling one of these out for the first time. And even though they don't have to provide documentation of the things that they are attesting to, they should have it. They should have it to the extent possible in case there is a challenge to what they said in the declaration. So do keep that in mind. It's a very, it's a you know, the whole thing is a protection, as you can tell, that's full of quite big holes. Not what I would have designed if I were Empress of the world. Okay, moving on to rental assistance. So the other big news in that relief package was that Congress appropriated $25 billion for emergency rental assistance. That is a lower number than we had and our allies have been looking for, and we will be pushing for more. But at this time, that's what we've got. It is running through the Treasury Department, and the money is supposed to go out to grantees, which will be states and territories and tribes, and also individual jurisdictions of greater than 200,000 in population can apply directly to be grantees. All of that money is supposed to get out the door from the federal government to those grantees by just before the end of this month. It was supposed to be 30 days from passage of the relief package, which I think now I can't remember. There were so many back and forths about the president signing it, but it was right toward the end of December. That, of course, doesn't mean this money will get out the door and, you know, into the pockets of landlords or the hands of tenants that quickly. You know, states and localities are scrambling to put together design of how this is going to look, and there is a fair amount of discretion at the state and local level. So it's going to look different in different states. It's going to look different to some extent even across states. And while I would love to be able to say, here's exactly how it will work, and this is, you know, what your tenant clients can expect, it's just too soon yet to say that. And as I say, it's going to vary depending on where you are. What I can tell you is that the aid is, for the most part, limited to households at 80% AMI and below, with a priority supposed to be given to families at 50% AMI and below. States and localities can actually target even lower AMIs if they choose to, but those are kind of the top level that's given. There are provisions for eligibility based on unemployment status as well. And if you go to our website or again to the National Low Income Housing Coalition, actually I would recommend that one. I think it's just a little bit punchier. They have FAQs about that rental assistance that I'm not going to try to run through in the time we have, but that I think are very useful and answer a lot of basic questions. The way that the money will go out, again, we don't know a lot about it, but what we do know is that in the first instance, the idea is that landlords would apply and get the money kind of in conjunction with their tenants. Certainly tenants should be encouraged to speak with their landlords about doing that if the landlord has not come to them. If there is a landlord who rejects or declines the money, tenants can apply for it, and they can apply for it to go directly to the landlord too. But if the landlord declines, there is a provision in the bill that allows for money to go directly to the tenant to be able to make payments. What we are hoping, and I will stop so people can ask questions if you want, but I will say we are hoping to see in the designs of these programs some sort of conditions placed on the landlords who accept this funding, you know, that will protect folks going forward as well from eviction for some period of time, and will hopefully, you know, if not totally wipe out whatever arrears they have, possibly at least put conditions on how that arrears can be dealt with in terms of, repayment periods and things like that. I should have said also that this money doesn't only have to be applied to rent, it can go to utilities, and there's a sort of catch-all for other housing expenses. So, it's not necessarily limited to those rent arrears. And there are provisions under certain conditions that allow for some prospective rent payments as well, as long as the arrears is dealt with or reduced first. So that's a lot. It's complicated, and it's a very fast-moving train. So, if you want me to, I'm happy to come back in several weeks and maybe we will know a lot more, but I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Thanks, Lisa. There are a couple questions. How does an agency access the funding for distribution?
So the grantees are going to be, as I said, either, the state or, tribal or territorial entity, or larger jurisdictions, so over 200,000 population. For the smaller jurisdictions, it would be for, like the state that oversees those funds. So making contact with whatever agency in your jurisdiction is administering those funds is the way to figure out, whether you can be a conduit or part of, the distribution system, or how to plug into it. But that's where, that's where the authority over those funds is going to sit.
And will it be like CDBG or ESG type funds again, like the previous ones were?
No, so they actually ran these instead through Treasury as coronavirus relief funds. So there was a block of money through the CARES Act that was treated that way, and this is some of that leftover and some additional. So it's not going to run through, sort of, it may end up running through those same channels, I should say, but it's not originating in the same place, in the federal government, and it's not kind of tracked in the exact same way that CBDG and ESG funds were. And there was, some debate among advocates about whether that was the best way, but we didn't get to write it in the end. So yeah, it is different. So we look to Treasury in this instance for the federal guidance, and we are expecting some additional guidance from Treasury at some point soon, but it's a little unclear given how close we are to the transition exactly how that's, the timing of that and what we can expect. I will say that NHLP, the Low Income Housing Coalition, and others have sent, letter to Treasury and have been talking to the transition team to try to have input about those higher level kind of guidelines, and allowing for flexibility and allowing, trying to maximize the effectiveness and impact to really protect tenants who are kind of on the edge.
So there's been a couple more questions about where to find out about the grant and the funding. So what I think I heard is that folks should be checking in with their state level or their city level entities that have been providing this type of funding and manage federal funds in their area.
Correct. Yeah, or okay. County even, because it may be. Right, it's not, the way it is in terms of population size. So a local jurisdiction, it could be a municipality, but it could be a county. Arguably it could be regional, but I'm not sure it will happen that way. So yes, I mean, I would go to the usual players that you know about, and they should at a minimum know if somebody else is involved or some other, agency or government office is involved and steer you there. And I'm sorry, I don't have more specifics. It's just, as I said, sort of a moving target at the moment.
Right, you don't have the specifics.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, so, okay, so whoever's been doing the federal funding around Community Development Block Grant and ESG, those are likely places to start to get the answers to where this money's going to flow.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, I hope that answers many of the questions that people are coming through with.
Can I just jump in for a quick second? So we just turned the hour, so we're going to keep going because people have lots of good questions. So expect probably another 15 minutes or so on the call to make sure we get as many questions answered as we can.
Okay, I'm going to have to go in a few minutes though, because I actually have another presentation to give. So, but I am happy if if we don't get to them and you want to forward me questions, I'm more than happy to, send back to you, Ellie and Bruce, some responses later in the day.
Well, there is one quick question that's very specific. I think you might be able to answer is how homeowners and tenants can get information about legal services available to them. I think we somewhat
yeah, so they can definitely always, check online to the extent they have that access with their local bar association should have, all of that information. Usually you can just Google legal aid near me and get a listing. The states usually generally have listings as well that will show you where those are. But one of the things that I'm hoping to do and develop is, and we're starting to do it here in California, is to have a little bit more detailed list for your agencies to have on hand so that you know kind of which legal aid offices handle certain things. Like in California, there's really only honestly a handful of legal aid offices that really deal with homeowner stuff, and much more on the tenant side, work on the tenant side. So I think, getting that information to you guys could be really helpful, and then you can share that with your clients. But there's a lot of online information available, and they just need to look at what the given agency's service scope is, geographic and in terms of whether they work with homeowners or not, because not all legal aids do, but they almost all do all work with tenants.
Let me add to that just a little bit. We are very interested in encouraging these kind of relationships where they work. New York State is a model that Ellie has talked about in the past. Philadelphia is a great example, but we know there's a lot of them around the country. These are really valuable relationships. We want to do anything we can to kind of encourage them. And I would say, yes, it's very good about the legal information, but it's also a very good kind of training and technical support relationship. And the relationships in Philadelphia reached out back to the predatory lending crisis, and housing agencies worked hand in hand to develop legislation, to develop strategies with lenders, to have legal strategies. I mean, there's a lot where we can amplify each other's work, and we are, it is partly what we want to really develop. There's also, as hopefully everybody knows, there's $20 million included in the last housing counseling assistance legislation for legal assistance for tenants, especially lower income tenants at risk of eviction. And that's another opportunity there. And we're hoping that this could leverage these relationships as well. That's why we're doing the survey we put out this morning. Please, we are very interested in trying to encourage this.
Yeah, well, that's great. I mean, we'll be continuing that conversation as things move forward, certainly. Are there other particular questions, Ellie, or?
Well, I have one question that kind of came in email prior to the presentation, and may have actually gotten emailed to you, but some of the ESG funds, as you may be aware, that some groups were targeting for tenant assistance.
Yes.
HUD is not allowing them to be used if there's an eviction moratorium in place. And so there was just a question about your thoughts about groups are being told, like contracts are being discontinued.
Huh.
And what your thoughts are.
So
can I just explain that just a little bit more for the audience? So what they're saying is that ESG funds can only be spent on people who are at imminent risk of eviction, and they're saying if there's a moratorium in place, that the risk is not imminent. And as we all know, people's evictions are, the landlords are filing eviction procedures and really moving people as far down the line as they can. There's people getting terrible notes, all that sort of thing. We feel like it's still imminent, and that it ought to be ESG funds should be available for these tenants. And we've brought this to HUD attention, and they're looking into it right now. But this is, we think, a critical issue that's kind of not getting addressed in the way it should be.
Yeah, and this is something that actually my colleague Mariel Block at NHLP has done a lot of work on in terms of kind of the kind of traditional thinking about where ESG funds can go, and this question of what counts as imminent risk in these strange days. So I'm actually going to ask if she would provide me with some of the analysis they did on those issues, and I will send those back to you, Ellie and Bruce, and you can share them with whatever groups are having that kind of issue, because I know it's something that's come up. It came up early and has continued to pop up in various ways, and we'd be happy to help engage with HUD, as it seems appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that sounds like it's it for us, Ellie. I think that's all the questions.
Yes, it is.
So thank you so much, as always, Lisa. I really appreciate your both clarity and patience on walking us through these things. We will tap into you during the rest of the year. So we have your email address, we have your phone number. We're going to keep on top of it, and appreciate all the support here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And let's do. I'm getting a bit of an echo here. So just a reminder about joining NHRC. You can click through to see what the membership dues schedule is. We just had a wonderful rush of groups renewing at the beginning of the year. It's really kind of like a little cheer that goes on in the office when several groups have renewed. It's kind of a vote of confidence. We know that money is not easy right now. For many groups, it's what keeps us going. It allows us to lobby to do our stuff. We've listed the benefits that exist. Credits, you can get credit reports at a substantial discount through CoreLogic Credco. We have the Savvy online student loan service that's deeply discounted. Really why you support us is because you support the work and our continuing efforts to really make your work more effective, amplify your work, get it some more respect, and really more funding. We're kind of all in the fight of this together, and we really appreciate the fact that so many of you have been so committed. I will just, one other quick reminder is in 2 weeks, we've got David Berenbaum, who's the head of the Office of Housing Counseling at HUD now, and we'll have a freewheeling conversation that I think is going to be, it's kind of refreshing to hear him talk about what the opportunities are. He's really interested in rolling up his sleeve and getting into a lot of the kinds of issues that we were working on with Sarah Jarek and beyond. He completely understands the challenges in the field. So it's a real opportunity for us. And this conversation will help leverage that relationship. So please plan on diving in, having your policy folks in, any of the people that work on your NOFA applications. It's all going to be fair game, and he won't be able to answer every question, but we will, we'll figure out what he can do, and he's going to be, I think, it'll be a good conversation. So with that quick note, thanks everybody out there. Appreciate the work you're doing. We do think about you all a lot as things go in it's really kind of challenging times, and really appreciate the kind of work you're doing. Thanks, everybody.